Welcome to the Prime Divide.
I'm the Blue Mantis.
This is Red Dwarf.
I'm Shadow.
And today we're going to be talking about pharmaceutical drugs and pharmaceuticals generally. This is really Red Dwarf's area of expertise. So why don't you start us out with a general overview of the situation as you see it?
Well, I think the situation is that us in the West, and it's increasingly more in the East, and basically everywhere, there seems to be this huge increasing reliance on pharmaceutical drugs to deal with what have been traditionally normal situations. Like, now that being shy is now like a disorder, and now
Social anxiety
yeah,
disorder?
and being sad even because somebody died now means that you have a major depressive disorder. And a lot of people are starting to wonder like how healthy it is to be pill popping all the time instead of letting our brains, which have evolved to deal with these issues, deal with these issues.
And whether or not we should be pathologizing and classifying as illness what are essentially inevitable and basically universal human emotional phases and responses to life events. Probably the biggest category is antidepressant drugs, which are typically what are called SSRI antidepressants, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. The rates of the use of those have now reached really high prevalence and proportions.
Yeah, they say roughly 1 in 10 people in North America are on antidepressants at any time. Higher rate for women of a slightly older age. Depression hits women quite a bit harder, roughly almost 2/3 harder, I believe.
Yeah, I've heard 25% of middle-aged women are on antidepressants.
So Shadow, what do you think? Why do you think depression hits women harder? Let's just...
I don't know. I usually have been taught that women have stronger social networks than men, and we are able to better carry the weight of society in that way. So I'm not entirely sure why we would... You know what? Most women have kids, and that is a reason to be depressed. Because they shoulder most of that burden, generally speaking.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you think maybe it's just women also report that they're depressed or more willing to say they are? Men have to try and like pride through it and say that, no, I'm not feeling sad.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good point.
Sometimes they don't even have a choice, even if you are depressed. If you're the providing member of the family, which typically it has been, you don't have that luxury to connect with yourself that way. You have to just soldier on.
Yeah, I think it's true that there's an idea that men have to be strong and unemotional, and women are expected traditionally to be more emotional, so they're maybe more free in admitting it. I've also heard that the reason that particularly like women in their 40s are on a lot of antidepressants is because that's when women sometimes go through menopause, which can be apparently depressing experience for a lot of people.
There seems to be the depression that comes also after, like immediately after childbirth. What was that woman who...
Postpartum depression.
What was the woman who drowned her 2 children and then...
There's been quite a few of those cases,
Yeah,
I think.
Jumped in the Assiniboine River after.
Yeah, the people get a crazy depressive spell. It's funny though, because women also sometimes get like a really euphoric period, I think. Or maybe it's that happens during pregnancy, and then... Like, I know that there's some hormonal euphoria that often goes around with some part of childbirth. I don't know if it's when you're pregnant or when you have young kids, and whether some women it like misfires or doesn't work out that way. But I mean, evolutionarily, there must be some like reward mechanism for reproducing, right?
Yeah,
if everyone just got depressed, you'd think like
Yeah.
it wouldn't happen as often.
So do you
as
get
it
like a
does.
massive dose of serotonin while you're pregnant and like sort of to encourage you to do it, and then once the pregnancy's over, your body readjusts, which means it could overcompensate and dump the level too much and throw you into a
Sort of
depressive
like
spiral.
withdrawing off of SSRIs.
Yeah.
Do you think that historically there are more depressed people now than there have ever been? Is there some evidence of that?
I think it's absolutely been shown to be like at the highest ever rates, which is sort of the paradox, because our life expectancy, our quality of life, our material affluence, our healthcare, our possessions are all, infinitely more abundant than at any other time. We're living longer, we have more stuff, we have better stuff, and yet the rates of depression as such seem to be at their highest recorded levels, as I understand it, which is counterintuitive. And some theories about that is like maybe there's something fundamental about the way we used to be living, whether it's as hunter-gatherers or as agricultural communities or as even religious cultures, like all those things have kind of fallen apart. So maybe, personal individual affluence just doesn't replace whatever being part of like a close-knit community who all shared one religion did for you, or part of a tribe who all hunted together and shared food did for you. Like, basically, we thought that stuff would make us happy, but apparently we've missed some part of the equation of what keeps people from getting depressed.
Yeah, because in one way I was thinking, it's the purpose of life, right? It could be religion, can be community, but it could also be, back in the day, it also would have been just survival. The idea of needing to survive requires hard work, which means the purpose of your life was to survive. You put your energy into achieving that purpose. Now you can basically, like, people will take care of you if you're not willing to take care of yourself in this society. Mm-hmm. The fact that just staying alive is no longer a big hard thing.
Yeah, and when you think about the emotional rush you must have got when your tribe was depending on you, and you went out there and actually brought home a deer, you probably got a fucking amazing high from being like, I fucking saved everybody's life. Like, I'm badass. I did this intense thing. Everybody was depending on me, and I came through. And at the end of the day, like, working 40 hours and getting your paycheck is like a tiny shadow of that sense of accomplishment where, yeah, you can go put food on the table, and yeah, you did something. But instead of going out and hunting a deer, or even working the fields, you sat at a desk for 40 hours. Like, maybe that's part of it. Just the work experience is not gratifying for most people. And it's true that, like, religion has collapsed, and as much as religion has problems, it does provide, like, meaning, a sense of, like, belief in an afterlife, right and wrong, higher power. And intuitively, it makes sense that if you lost the belief in that, and the whole culture had lost the belief in that to a large extent, that could correspond to depression. Science has taught us, maybe there is no God, or maybe there is no afterlife. I mean, that's depressing for people. They don't want to think that, death is the end of everything, or there's no, like, ultimate meaning. So it could be that, like, positivistic science and empiricism and, like, materialism, as opposed to, like, spiritualism and religion, could be part of the reason for the rising rates of depression.
Because they do say atheists are more prone to depression and early death than are people with religious beliefs. In fact, like, a useful treatment for depression is religious connection with your community. And whether or not it's the community aspect or, like, the actual sort of religious aspect, meditation, has been proven to help people kick depression. So, and when you think about it, like, it is pretty depressing to think that nothing you do has any cosmic, eternal significance. It's like, no matter what I do, like, that all you can really do after that is descend into hedonism. It's like, might as well, like, feel good, because, like, it doesn't matter if anything I do is good.
Yeah, I mean, unless you become, like, a heroic humanist who devotes his life to, like, social improvement and science and, like, curing diseases and building, like, useful technologies, which is all worthy and worthwhile and good. But, yeah, there's no actual reason to do that other than just, like, deciding to be good. Nobody's forcing you or telling you that you should.
Sort of like, it's almost like a Buddhist view of things. You just want to reduce suffering. Suffering is the big understanding. Like, it's not, like, the whole point is to get rid of people's suffering.
Yeah, and in a way, that's what antidepressants and SSRIs are aiming to do, right?
Yeah.
In a certain sense, they're like, oh, people feel bad. We can use science to make them feel better.
What do you guys think about, self-medication rather than going the pharmaceutical drug route? So things like kratom and even to some extent alcohol.
Yeah, it's a good question, because, I mean, in a way, you have three options. Not medicating and just, like, dealing with it naturally, with no chemical aids, or going to your doctor and saying, here's what I'm experiencing, tell me what drug to take and I'll take your word for it. Or doing your own research and being like, I think this is going to help me, I'm going to take this, even if this isn't what my doctor suggested, right? And I think all of those have their pros and cons. So maybe in order to answer that question, what do you know, Red Dwarf, about the consequences or the negative aspects of, for example, taking an SSRI antidepressant? What are the upsides and what are the downsides?
Well, let's think. SSRIs, they came out basically with Prozac. So, like the 90s, that's when the band Prozac was out, and it kind of became a big part of the culture then, because the drugs seemed to have a lot of promise. Unfortunately, it seems that the reason the drugs had a lot of promise is because companies don't actually need to report or publish all of their drug trials on drug trials that show no positive advantage or show a negative advantage. They simply don't publish. Doctors don't see it, and they only need to produce two studies where the drugs show a benefit over placebo.
2 out of like
Out of
5,000?
infinite, 2 out of infinite.
That's ridiculous, because that's marginal error.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like if you keep making studies, eventually you'll have 2 that
You'll have
show.
2.
And the fact is, like, when people are looking at it now, like David Healy was one of the early doctors talking about it, and he realized that these drugs should not have made it past regulators. Like the dangers of them were quite immense, and they started talking about how they produce suicide in youth. Even they've actually found in guinea pigs. In the older guinea pigs, it mellows them out. In the younger guinea pigs, it actually makes them extremely aggressive. Just because it releases all these brain chemicals, like when in your kind of developmental years, you already have an overabundance of.
Oh.
But as far as health consequences go, they're pretty intense, and there's a lot of people saying that the dangers are not at all worth the benefits. Like it causes sexual problems, it causes intestinal problems, it causes cancer in certain kinds of people, it causes osteoporosis.
And this is on the shelves?
This stuff is all written on the bottle. It causes aggression. And the worst part of all is it actually often prolongs depressive symptoms, because once you come off of them, you will basically usually suffer a relapse and fall back into it. So they actually, the amount of time you're supposed to take them for them to even take effect is often less time than the average depressive episode. So basically, like
by the time you would have felt better anyway, that's when you notice that you're feeling better.
Yes.
Well, because I talked to my doctor about it, and he said when you take antidepressants, the first time you take them, you usually are on them for 6 months. The second time you take them, you're on them for a year, and the third time you take them, you're on them for the rest of your life.
I don't understand what you mean about first, second, and third.
Well, say you're depressed. He says, I'm going to put you on a course of antidepressants. You're going to take them for 6 months, and we're going to take you off and see if you are better. But if you get worse again or you need them again, the next time you're going to take them for a year. And if you get better, you stop. But, and then at the third time, you have to take them forever. So it's a long-term treatment. It's something you got to take every day for a long time. It doesn't even start working for 4 weeks. And by the time it starts working, you're addicted. And this is what I find really remarkable, is that SSRIs are marketed as unaddictive, non-addictive drugs. And that, as far as I can tell, is an absolute bold-faced lie.
They use technicalities to say that, because the fact is, going off them, you're physically dependent. Like if you're on a large enough dose and you go off them, you'll die. Like the same way like heroin.
You're addicted.
The way they are able to justify saying they're not addictive is because you don't increasingly need larger doses to get the same effect. You can stay on one dose perpetually. So apparently one of the main factors to say if it's addicting or not is that you build up a tolerance and need to keep taking more and more to get the same effect.
Which is frankly bullshit.
I know.
If something causes a physical dependence such that when you don't have that substance in your body you experience withdrawal, that is the definition of addiction. And if you can die from it, which only some drugs can cause that, Xanax can cause a fatal withdrawal, alcohol can cause a fatal withdrawal, heroin can cause a fatal withdrawal, and you're saying SSRIs can cause a fatal withdrawal? So clearly heroin and SSRI antidepressants are in the same class of addictive drug. The reason that they can say that also is because unlike heroin or crack or meth, you don't get an immediate reward cycle. Like when you take your first Prozac pill, you don't get like a huge high where you're like, fuck, this is awesome, I want to do this every day. Whereas when you smoke crack for the first time, so I hear, it's just immediately
Suspect.
you're immediately feeling great, and so you have that instant gratification. And it's true that SSRIs don't cause that, but it is absolutely true that if you take them, you will get addicted. And here's the thing. SSRIs are actually more addictive than crack, because as hard as it is, it's possible to smoke crack occasionally without becoming physically dependent. But if you take SSRIs on a doctor's orders, you have to take them every day for at least a couple months, which means you will get addicted. So you're actually more likely to be able to do heroin or smoke crack or do meth and not get addicted than do a doctor's treatment of SSRIs.
Yeah, there's no reason to use SSRIs for their benefit without becoming physically addicted.
Yeah, if they're going to work for you, you're going to be hooked. And they're telling you they're not addictive, and they're lying to you. That's a lie.
So then, Red Dwarf, this is your area of expertise. SSRIs are out. What's in to help people? Because depression is widespread, like we said.
Well, there's a lot of useful treatments, actually. Cognitive behavioral therapy, which is basically just, it's a type of speech therapy when you just talk with a doctor, but instead of doing like the old psychoanalysis route where you go deep into your childhood and like work out all your stuff, basically you teach yourself a bunch of mental tricks to prevent like cyclical downward thought spirals, the way you can become depressed and fixate on the negative. They teach you ways out of that, ways to basically like make yourself think of something and associate it with something better. So
when you're thinking, oh, I screwed up at this. I suck.
Yeah.
I always screw up. I always suck. Oh, I hate myself. My life sucks. You're going down this period of like successively worse negative thoughts, and they're going to teach you to say, oh, I screwed up. That's okay. Everybody screws up. You know,
Yeah,
oh, I screw up all the
basically.
time. Yeah, but I get better. I learn from it. You know.
Or they'll teach you to focus on something you know that you're proud of, that you've done good. So just like instantly turn your bad thoughts back to fixate on this good idea. It's like suddenly you have all these like positive emotions coming out, and then it's sort of just, you're tricking your brain. And some people kind of complain about it because it is like you're not dealing with your deepest problems. You're basically just convincing yourself to gloss over the negative, which is all our SSRIs are anyway, because all they're doing is negating your emotions. So it's like no highs, no lows, we're going to zombify you because then you probably won't kill yourself. It's like, oh, that's good. It's better than killing yourself, obviously, but clearly there's better ways. Like, and other things, there's been some studies showing that marijuana users are actually less prone to depression. There's obviously exercise and diet have been shown, like lack of vitamin D, lack of your main vitamin Bs. Those ones have been shown to people with those have depression, lack of omega-3s.
Probably omega-3s.
Yeah, magnesium was also one. Like diet's a huge one, exercise is a huge one. Meditation is extremely effective. Yoga, yeah. Religious, basically just any kind of community, interacting with other people.
Probably of course, art, doing creative stuff, you know.
I haven't seen any studies on that, but I'd imagine that'd be the case. Like, and for some of these, obviously, when people are in a depressed spot, it's very hard to suddenly start an exercise routine or go out and meet new people or go out and like communicate.
Right.
And, like,
so the argument is, well, you're so depressed, you can't do these things.
Yeah,
so we got to give you a chemical boost.
And so there's something like ketamine has been shown. There's a lot of now studies coming out. And the really important, cool thing about ketamine is that not only does it effectively treat it, it effectively treats it immediately. And like the big worry with depression is they gotta kill themselves, because if they're so sad that like their life's not worth living, they could kill themselves. But ketamine kicks in within like a day, and it's the benefits are equal or better than SSRIs.
Better, I've heard, and like you say, it's an instant benefit. And I've heard you don't need to keep taking it like SSRIs. You can give. And this is the thing, too. There's a class of depressive people who are severely depressed and treatment resistant, which means that Prozac isn't actually working for those people. They're a class of people who don't benefit from traditional treatments. So those people up till now have been hopeless. Like, they're hopelessly depressed. They need to be institutionalized, kept on suicide watch, and basically, like, forcibly prevented from killing themselves by keeping them in, like, padded rooms and keeping all sharp objects away from them. Like, they're a sad case. And ketamine has been shown to basically instantly cure those people. And these are studies coming out of Harvard and Princeton that have been peer-reviewed, scientifically done. And what I've heard said is this discovery of the antidepressant effect of ketamine is the biggest breakthrough in depression research in 50 years. And so when you put it side by side, ketamine and SSRIs take months to work. Ketamine works instantly. SSRIs have to be taken every day. Ketamine doesn't. And then the question becomes...
huge side effects.
Yeah.
Are there any long-term side effects from using ketamine on an ongoing basis, even if you don't?
Yes. If you use ketamine on an ongoing, regular basis at high doses, you can develop severe bladder problems. Like if you're taking heavy doses of ketamine for a long time, you can have to have your bladder removed surgically. You can die from that if you don't get like a bladder transplant or like bladder surgery. You can start like pissing blood.
You don't like.
It's also known to have some psychologically addictive properties, and people who do a lot of it perpetually kind of do suffer certain weird types of psychosis where they're less aware of the world around them and more in kind of their own.
And what is that level of excess?
Well, for the bladder problems, that takes a substantial amount of ketamine. Like that develops in long-term, daily, heavy users. So you have to consume. It'd be kind of like alcohol. If you drink a huge amount of alcohol, your liver's going to go out. But most people who drink alcohol, their liver's not going to go out. The psychosis issue is, it depends, right? Because that's going to be depending on maybe pre-existing psychological problems that haven't been recognized. So if you have a tendency to schizophrenia or psychosis, you may not know that, and then ketamine may be the thing that triggers that, and that could be unpredictable unless you do like a full genetic screening of somebody before they take it, right? But then again, I think SSRIs can also cause psychosis.
Yeah.
And because ketamine, as I understand it, it doesn't need to be done regularly, so most of those problems come from the recreational abuse of ketamine for like a party drug, doing it all the time. I'm not sure if those kind of symptoms would be that significant if it was being given by a doctor and he's saying, you know, come in, I'll give you one small dose. and then come back in 3 months or 4 months and 6 months, I'll give you another, I doubt you would get very many of those symptoms.
Yeah.
Because ketamine has a long history of safe human use. Like, it's been used medically for a long time as an anesthetic. And so, obviously, to be approved for that use, it's been shown to be safe enough to use routinely. It's been shown safe enough psychologically and physically to be given to children for anesthetics. Babies can be given ketamine, you know. Yeah, because if you're going to do surgery on a baby, right, you need to anesthetize them just like anybody else.
Yeah.
And so ketamine is safe enough for that. So I think it's fair to say it's fairly safe because it has a long history of human use. It's been used medically for a long time. It's just that now they've discovered that not only is it an extremely effective anesthetic, it's also an extremely effective antidepressant. And just like if you give it to someone for a surgery, they're not going to develop all these psychosis and bladder issues because it's just being used in that one context of that needed surgery. You know, it's just like anything, right? If you abuse it and overuse it, you're going to run into more troubles.
It's like saying if you're stressed out, you have a couple of drinks to calm you down. It's like, yeah, you won't develop like liver infection, you won't destroy your body as long as you don't drink that amount constantly every day.
For a decade or two. Yeah. So that's another thing. Another one that most people don't know about is kratom, which is mostly a Southeast Asian plant. It's in the coffee family. It grows in places like Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Bali, Myanmar, Southeast Asian countries, and it's can be orally ingested, the leaf of the plant. And many people that I know or that I've talked to have found that to be an effective antidepressant. That's quite safe, not that physically addictive, not that, many side effects associated with it. It's natural, which for some people, they like a natural substance as opposed to a pharmaceutical substance. It's a leaf directly off a tree, dried, powdered, and eaten. And that, I think, is a potentially very promising antidepressant that, as far as I know, hasn't really been studied yet for that use. But from anecdotal reports of people's personal experience, it can be very helpful. And quite safe, and can be taken on an as-needed basis. And like ketamine, and unlike SSRIs, it's immediately effective. Within half an hour, you're going to feel better. And you don't need to take it every day for it to work. You can take it when you're depressed. When you're really depressed, you're like, I'm really depressed, I feel like shit. You can take some kratom and you're going to feel better. And you're not going to go into withdrawal unless you're taking it every day at very high doses for a very long time.
That is the worst part about the SSRIs, basically any of the other major, pharmaceutically profitable antidepressants, is that they blanket you. You take them and they are now affecting you indefinitely for perpetuity. You can't just take them when you're feeling bad and have them fix you. St. John's wort has also been a long proven. They've done meta-analyses now that show that St. John's worts are as effective as SSRIs. But possibly the weirdest part of all is the fact that depression's extremely subjective, right? We used to think it was a chemical reaction caused by a lack of serotonin or a lack of norepinephrine or a lack of dopamine. So they're like, all right, so SSRIs is selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. It means it stops the serotonin in your brain from reuptaking, which means you have more of it available.
So your brain is producing serotonin, which is a feel-good chemical, like dopamine. But your brain is also degrading that back down.
Yes, it's always reabsorbing it. So what the SSRIs prevent it from reabsorbing it. But what they found out is that what they thought before was they had the chemical imbalance theory, which meant it's like, so you have too little of that. So it's like that's why you always saw in the commercials, like, yeah, you just have a brain chemical imbalance. You just need a chemical and it'll fix you. But the fact is, they don't actually have any proof that that's true. That's just it's a marketing slogan, and because they've given people drugs that reduce the amount of serotonin in their brain, and guess what? It made them less depressed. And what they've started to figure out is that our brains are so self-driven, everything's so subjective to us that what is actually happening is our brain is choosing the correct levels. If you feel that something is going to help you, it does. If you feel that it's not, it doesn't. And they've been finding that placebos are equally effective to SSRIs or to St. John's wort, or any of the other, basically most of the other chemicals.
Interesting.
Because it's in your head, and what you believe is going to happen is what happens. So people they say, here's a drug, and one of them's a sugar pill, and the sugar pill is equally effective
with less side effects.
With no side effects. It's a sugar pill.
Blue Mantis and I talk about this. I have never suffered from depression, so I tend to take the view of like, just snap out of it. Like, just stop being depressed. Like, what's wrong with you kind of thing, which is terrible, I know. But now that you raise this issue, it's what your brain is willing to accept as truth, then maybe that argument isn't that far off. Maybe you are able to just snap out of it?
Yeah, but yeah, it's just snap out of it has to be associated with some kind of action, though. Because like, just the idea is like, fix yourself. It's like, nobody's gonna do that. They're bummed out. It's like, there's...
If they could, they probably would.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you give them this fake sugar pill,
yeah,
tell them to fix themselves then.
Yeah, that's what they're finding. Like,
well, you tell them this will fix you, and then they fix themselves without realizing it.
Yeah.
And so it seems like what should be done is the first line of treatment should be placebo. Like, you should go ahead and the doctor's like, here's a pill that works for most people.
Yeah.
Try this. And then you give them a sugar pill, and that's going to help a lot of people. And then, you know, that will...
Up the sugar pill dose. Be like, well, we'll just up
yeah, we'll up your dosage. And
then...
the only thing is that's going to be published somewhere that that's what they're doing, and then everyone's going to know that they're getting sugar pills, and then it's not going to work.
Well, most people don't read.
No, but if it, you know, if they completely switch from SSRIs to placebos, that's going to get out there, and people are going to know. You know.
There's a really weird study though that shows that the placebo could even sort of work even once people have broken the blind and are aware it's a placebo. Because ethically you're not allowed to give somebody a placebo and tell them it's a drug. You're allowed to say this might be a drug, this might be a placebo, and then give them one or the other. You're allowed to do that, but you can't just be like, here's an SSRI, which is actually a sugar pill, which will make you better. But what they have found is that even telling them, the doctors, there's been a study, the doctors went to the people and said, this is a placebo. It has been known to help many patients suffering severe depression. I think it can help you. And if the doctors do this like in a warm, like trusting way that makes the person feel that they're like the doctor's like not just like messing with them.
And you tell them the science. You say, here's the science on how effective placebos are. They're extremely effective. They work in this many cases.
They didn't even bother to explain what it was. Like, they think this will help you. And what happens is the patients didn't believe the doctor was giving them a sugar pill. They like, this thing worked great. There's no way this was a sugar pill. So it's like they're willing to believe that the doctor was lying and that this like non-drug they gave them was like some miracle drug they've been like holding out on.
So placebo treatment seems like a potential thing. Naturopathic things like St. John's wort is a potential thing. Ketamine therapy is a potential treatment. Kratom is a potential treatment. There's
exercise, spirituality, diet.
Yeah. There's also something called S-adenosylmethionine, or SAMe, which is a supplement, non-prescription supplement in most places, that has been shown in many studies to be as effective as SSRI antidepressants. And also has a lot of other benefits. Like, it's extremely good for your liver, it's good for your joints, it reduces arthritis, it generally improves health, and it doesn't have any of the side effects really that are associated with SSRIs. And so, in my opinion, SAMe, S-adenosylmethionine, is a much preferable treatment because it has all these benefits in addition to being a good antidepressant. Yeah. So there's lots of alternatives. One thing that I think is important in this discussion, Shadow, what were you telling me today about school shootings in the United States and the rates of that?
Since the Sandy Hook shooting alone, just since that one incident, almost 200 children have died from shootings. So that was a year ago.
So 200 children in the States alone in 1 year have been shot and killed in schools. And Red Dwarf, what do you know about the correlation between school shootings and SSRI antidepressants?
Oh, SSRI, that they're proven, like they have to write on their own bottles that they do cause hostility and sometimes just like insane aggression. They have that warning. There was actually
homicidal and suicidal behavior.
In Manitoba, there was actually a boy who he was on Prozac and he was actually trying to come off of it. He stabbed his best friend to death over his friend making a mess on their kitchen floor. He like dumped some food on it, stabbed the guy to death. The judge actually, they were going to charge him as an adult because he was like 17 at the time. But they decided, like, no, it was like, you are on a drug, you were forced to take a larger dose of it than like you would have chosen to by your doctor. So the fact that you chose, that they gave you a drug that makes you aggressive and you were aggressive, we'll charge you as a youth at least, and we'll like put this into mitigating circumstances as to how you're charged.
So how close is the correlation? Like, what percent, if you know approximately, of school shootings are correlated with the shooter using an SSRI.
I don't know the percent, to be honest, but the number, David Healy produced a list on his website. There's been about 67 major school violence scenarios where the person was either on the drug or going through withdrawal from it. Withdrawal almost seems to be the worst of it, because then like the chemicals are really messed up because they're trying to rebalance. And
the withdrawal from SSRIs, I've heard from many people, are equal to or worse than almost any other withdrawal you can go to.
People talk about, they say that you're getting electrocuted. You just feel all the time like you're being electrocuted.
Head zaps and brain zaps and an exploding head syndrome. I know someone, close relation, who was very cheerful, outgoing, active, creative, happy, social, but ran into a rough patch, was put on SSRIs by his doctor, started to feel better, and decided, hey, I'm going to try and go off these things, and basically said, his description was, I felt like my body was trying to crawl out of my skin. It was like trying to crawl out of your own skin. It was pure agony, and I realized I couldn't get off them. So here's a guy who had everything going for him, and is now basically addicted because he couldn't get off them now, which means he's still on them, which means the next time he tries to go off, it's going to be even harder, right?
Yeah.
So if you couldn't do it the first time, how are you going to do it the second time, you know?
Blue Mantis, I'm not quite sure where you were going with the people who were associated with the mass shootings or the children's shootings were on depressants. Was that simply what was the connection you're trying to make?
Well, I've heard, like, Alex Jones has talked a lot about how, because basically, I mean, this is it, there's a debate right now about gun control, you know, because there's all these school shootings going on, and people are saying, well, there's too many guns on the streets, we need to clamp down on guns, get guns off the street, make it harder to get guns, restrict guns more in order to prevent school shootings. And what someone like Alex Jones is saying, no, it's not a gun issue, it's an SSRI antidepressant issue, because if you look at these, people who have guns are not going out and shooting children. People who have guns and are on SSRI antidepressants are going out and shooting people.
I guess what I was curious about is that you weren't making the connection too closely that it was a mental health issue, because I think that's a dangerous argument.
Well, so what you're saying is like obviously people do put forward the idea, it's like if the people are on antidepressants, then they're already kind of mentally ill.
Yeah.
So is the fact that they go out and do the shootings caused by the fact that they're already mentally ill, or the fact that they're on these drugs for the mental illness?
Yeah.
And what that comes down to, there didn't used to be school shootings like this. They were like extraordinarily rare until basically the invention of Prozac. And because the fact is, like, people used to like people would kill themselves. Like, suicide's always been around, but it's become fairly rare that people will go into their office or their school and start murdering classmates with crazy guns.
But you raise a good point, because then you get into the question of, is it the fact that they're on Prozac that's causing them to do this, or is it the fact that they were already mentally ill?
And I think that the former is what the argument we want to be making, not the latter. Just because they have mental health issues, then you start criminalizing, or at least stigmatizing mental health, and making it seem monstrous, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
No, but if I'm not following it right, what you're saying is the argument that says that, because you're saying, no, it's not the Prozac, it's the mental illness.
No, I was worried that you were not making that connection clear enough that it was the Prozac.
Right, no, because that's my opinion and Alex Jones' opinion. It's not being mentally ill. I mean, that's part of it, and there are certain kinds of mental illness that are definitely correlated to that kind of behavior. But I think the evidence is that it's not just being mentally ill or depressed.
It's a combination of being in withdrawal or on isolation.
Yeah.
Or it could be.
Yes, that is something I can support. I couldn't support, because, you know, a lot of the people out there who are trying to demonize the mental health issue, saying it's not the guns, it's the people that have the...
Yeah, I gotta deal with the mental... Here's the list of SSRI shooting stories. So let's just throw out a few of them. School shooting in Illinois, 6 dead, 15 wounded. Perpetrator was in withdrawal from Prozac. School shooting, 2005, Minnesota, 10 dead, 7 wounded. Dosage increased of Prozac 1 week before rampage. School shooting, Paxil, 2001, Pennsylvania. 14-year-old girl shoots and wounds classmates at Catholic school.
So it's like every single instance.
It's a pretty long list. Like,
are there any instances where they weren't on some sort of... Like, I wonder...
I bet the list would be shorter.
Yeah. If there was a list at all.
Japan, antidepressants, 2001, 8 dead, 15 wounded. Assailant had taken 10 times his normal dose of depression meds. So that was taking way too much of the meds, which obviously doesn't help. But the fact is that even in 2004, even when the drugs were still quite well thought of by society, by people, in the US and in the UK, they slapped on warnings saying that, yeah, you gotta watch for people killing themselves or being hostile to other people.
Homicide.
Yeah, and these mass murders weren't that common before. At least they weren't, the purposeless ones weren't as common. And because it's such like a weird trick, because like even depression wasn't as prevalent until the companies that thought they had found a cure for it decided to start running ads telling everybody they're depressed and that it's not normal to be depressed.
Yeah. Well,
People start reclassifying their experience according to this discourse of depression being a mental illness. So if someone feels sad, they used to say, I feel sad.
Yeah.
Now if they feel sad, they say, oh, I saw a commercial about this. This must be depression. I must be sick. I must have a mental illness. I better go see my doctor. I better get antidepressant drugs.
I think it's the same thing. You run into the same problem when you can make money off of a human condition. So when you can make money off of putting people into prisons, that's a problem.
Yeah.
When you can make money off of
People
the
being-
mental health of people, and then you can also not only prescribe the medications that supposedly deal with it, you also write the fucking book about what is considered a mental health
Yeah.
issue. Like, you can pay to get things put in the
And that's
DSM or whatever.
the DSM, yeah. The worst part is the newest one. Like one of the old writers was talking about it before. Was his name Alan Castle, and he was talking about the idea that the DSM keeps expanding year after year, and some of the people who work on it have connections to the pharmaceutical industry. Unfortunately, a lot of the big opinion holders have very, lucrative connections to the pharmaceutical industry. And so this year, the newest DSM is changing depression. There used to be something called the bereavement exclusion, meaning if you were sad for 2 months normally that means you have major depressive disorder. If you were sad for 2 months after somebody died, they'd say, okay, he's grieving, that's normal, that's human. They've gotten rid of that exclusion. So suddenly, somebody dies, you're sad for a few weeks, it's like, whoa, you're mentally disordered.
Right.
And,
They got rid of it.
They got rid of it.
That's crazy.
So it's like now the worst part is, like, if doctors, if the prescriptions for SSRIs were handed, like, I'm not even saying that there's nobody who benefits from SSRIs. There are some people who are extremely resistant to all kinds of treatment, and literally silencing their emotions is the best thing for them. But they're extremely rare. We're talking probably 1% of the people who receive them. And what is happening instead is that we have because it's primary care physicians who mostly write the prescriptions for SSRIs, not psychiatrists, not mental health experts. It's doctors, and then they have about a 15 half-an-hour meeting with a patient who says, I'm not feeling well, and the first thing the doctor says should be, are you getting enough vitamin D? Are you getting enough omega-3s? Are you getting enough vitamin Bs?
Yeah.
Are you exercising? What's going on in your life? And before they say, all right, here's the prescription for a drug that you'll have to be on for the next 6 months for it to, the next month for it to even work. Mm-hmm. It's like let's get rid of all the obvious stuff. But that doesn't happen. Partially because the pharmaceutical lobbies directly to doctors. They take them on expensive cruises to educate them. They straight up just give them shit.
Mm-hmm.
You guys want to take a quick break?
Let us take a quick hiatus. We'll be right back with you. And we're back.
Welcome back to the Prime Divide.
Hope you didn't miss us too much.
Talking about pharmaceutical antidepressants, pharmaceuticals generally. I was going to talk about my personal experience talking to my doctor. He was recommending me SSRIs, basically completely selling them. Like, he's like, they're fantastic. He's like, so many people take them. That many people wouldn't take them if they weren't great. He's like, clearly they're awesome. They're a multi-billion-dollar industry, so that must mean they're fantastic and good. He's like, they're totally not addictive. They're safe. They're great drugs. I'm like, so they're not addictive. I'm knowing full well they are addictive, and he's telling me that. He's like, no, they're not addictive at all. I'm like, and you have to take them your whole life? He's like, oh, basically, yeah. And the funniest thing is, I told him, I've heard some bad things about them. I don't think I want to take them. And he literally said, you're like a savage from the jungle. Those were his exact words. He said, you're like a savage from the jungle. His exact words. So first of all, how ridiculous is that? First of all, it's offensive to people who live in the jungle because savage is not a politically correct term for people from other cultures who live in other environments. You know, like that's not appropriate at all. Those people aren't savages at all. You know, they're
Great statement.
great people. Living in environmental harmony with their environments, and you know, if anything, we're the savages.
Well, obviously the implications are insane. Like, even as how he meant it, is like, you won't take this pill that I think you should take that I'm not telling you all the information about.
You're like a black dude who lives in the South. No, I mean, it's absurd. And then he said, he's like, you're a savage from the jungle who comes into the city and sees a car wreck and then thinks, oh, cars are really bad, but we all know cars are great. And so he's saying, you know one person who got messed up from SSRIs, well, that's like one person who had a car crash, but that doesn't mean cars are bad. And I'm thinking, well, actually, I personally don't think cars are a good thing. I don't just accept that personal vehicles is a good idea. I think it's a fucking terrible idea. Massively environmentally wasteful, kills a person every second from car accidents, contributes to air pollution, incredibly wasteful, you know, like, as opposed to the alternative of back in the day being like, why don't we just build buses, trains, and airplanes, and, you know, monorails everywhere so everyone has really good, fast, reliable, safe, clean, you know, transit. So that was just another thing. I don't even agree with you about that point. I don't agree with you saying I'm like a savage from the jungle and, you know, fucking cars kill a person every second, you know, from car accidents, and probably another person every second from lung pollution and air pollution.
Aren't that
So if you're saying that SSRIs are like cars, then I'm thinking so they kill a person every second and like 100 million people a year, whatever it is.
They're one way I can use to get around, but they have a higher chance of killing me than most other things.
Yeah, it's convenient and flashy, and I don't know. I mean, you know, I take the bus, so I didn't take the SSRIs. And he kept telling me, like, you know. And the funny thing is, I didn't even go in to talk to him about depression. I never even said I was depressed. I said I wasn't depressed. You know, like that wasn't even what I went to talk to him about.
What were you saying? What?
Well, I was talking to him about panic attacks because I had a few panic attacks, which sucked, and so I wanted to talk to him about it. And that's a different issue. It's anxiety. So that was one thing that's interesting, is that the use of these drugs is so prevalent now that
they give them for everything. They give them people who shop too much. They've started using SSRIs for people with shopping addictions.
Don't they prescribe them off-label too for things like sleeping and everything?
You're not supposed to give them to youth, but they do all the time. They give them for any kind of anxiety. They give them for any kind of just like.
Now, and to be fair, the alternative to an antidepressant for anxiety is like an anti-anxiety like benzodiazepine, like Xanax, and that is probably the second most heavily prescribed drugs. Well, the three really big bad pharmaceutical drugs are benzodiazepines like Xanax, SSRI antidepressants like Prozac, and narcotic painkillers like OxyContin. Those are all massive problems. There's millions of people addicted to them. They're serious addictions with severe withdrawal. They're very overprescribed, and they get people hooked. Now, benzodiazepines are very dangerous. If you get addicted, which is easy to do, you can get addicted to Xanax in like 2 weeks. If you take Xanax every day for 2 weeks, you're probably addicted. Now, you can drink for 2 weeks and not be addicted, like for most people. It's quite an addictive drug, and the addiction, once you have it, if you withdraw too quickly, you can die. So it's serious. Now, so that's a problematic drug, but there are certain advantages of a problematic drug like Xanax over an SSRI, which is that Xanax works quickly, within 30 minutes, and it works as needed. So you can wait until you're having a panic attack, and then take a benzodiazepine, and only take it when you're having a panic attack. So if you're having 2 panic attacks a month, you might be taking 2 Xanax pills a month. You're not going to get addicted taking that many drugs. It's going to work right away. It's going to kill the panic attack. And it's effective, and if you're really careful with it and really thoughtful and cognizant of how easy it is to get hooked on it, you can avoid addiction, whereas with Prozac, you cannot avoid addiction.
The whole point is to become addicted to it so that it works.
But that being said, benzodiazepines are not a great way to go for anxiety. A much better alternative is valerian root, which is a natural, basically natural benzodiazepine. It's similar method of action, but much less addictive, quite effective, natural, much safer. So, you know, valerian root is a good treatment. Passion flower, kava, those things can be helpful. Etizolam is an analog of benzodiazepines that they prescribe in Japan, and it's much less addictive than traditional benzodiazepines. It's been shown to be less addictive and have like a reverse tolerance, and basically people who've taken both Xanax and Etizolam will say it's much less addictive. So that's preferable. And again, it's like, why don't they prescribe that in the U.S.? It's like, you know, it may just be because...
It comes down to pharmaceutical clout, is that none of the big U.S. companies have the patent on
They're making
Etizolam.
a ton of money on Xanax. What do they want to go to?
This is the really important thing to remember, though, people, is that the fact that these drugs get so big isn't because they're so effective, it's because they're the ones that the companies with the money have on patent, which means advertising. You're being hit with wave after wave of advertising. Everyone around you is being hit with the same advertising. People start telling you, oh look, I'm taking this drug because of all the advertising I saw. But there's nothing that makes it better than something like St. John's wort. It's the only thing is they're the ones that are profitable for the companies to tell you about. So everything that's not profitable, no matter how much better it is for you, you will not be told about.
Yeah, and that's why there's no natural medicines being prescribed.
Yes.
That's why marijuana is not, being prescribed. They're not even allowed to tell you an apple is good for you. Like they can't even tell you like eating an apple a day will reduce your risk of colon cancer. You cannot put like a statement on an apple saying that because the pharmaceutical industry is so dominant. And they don't make any money from natural medicines because if something is existing in nature, they can't patent it. They can't patent an apple. They can't patent marijuana because they didn't invent it.
Yeah.
And that's why those drugs, that's why kratom is not being prescribed for pain, and instead they're prescribing OxyContin, which is basically pharmaceutical heroin. And the reason they're prescribing OxyContin and ruining millions of lives. OxyContin addiction in America is a massive problem. If they had been prescribing kratom as the first line of defense for pain relief, which it is effective for, a lot of those addictions could have been avoided. But they can't do that because they don't own the patent.
There's no money there.
They don't own the patent.
So Shadow, you had a point about a trade deal, and I think that has some effects on pharmaceutical laws.
Yeah, is it the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Yeah.
So that it's being debated right now in these secret courts where the public don't have access to get their say in. And,
Extremely democratic.
And it's under the pretense of being a Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement. So that, there's 12 countries involved, the big ones, the US and Australia, the UK, and, the big ones.
And there's a bunch of little East ones like Vietnam and some of the,
Yeah, so, and so it's under the pretense of this trade agreement, but there's like 30 or some odd like stipulations as part of this agreement, or the terms of the agreement. 2 of them cover trade related anything. The rest of it is all about changing the regulations that govern corporations such as Big Pharma. Tobacco companies is another one, and I'll come up to those examples in a second. But basically it's saying these are the things that we want to change about it. So, for example, I don't remember which pharmaceutical company it was, but it is currently suing the Canadian government because
I think that's Pfizer.
Pfizer?
I think it's Pfizer.
Suing the Canadian government for hundreds of millions of dollars.
Pfizer is a
Pfizer was the one
I think
Prozac.
Prozac is a Pfizer product.
And the reason they're suing the Canadian government is because we have laws that protect consumers, protect citizens, and keep medication affordable. So that's as part of the
Right. So
Canadian
basically,
system.
they want to take away any vestige of resistance to their overarching domination of the world. Like they want to take
For
away
price,
they
particularly.
and they want to take away the right of governments to maybe in any way interfere with their marketing or their attempt to get lots of people on these drugs.
So that's one. And so then this TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, is saying that it will actually, and then this is the part I don't understand, the Canadian government will lose its sovereignty or change its ability or authority to actually protect its citizens. And so I wasn't clear on how a Trans-Pacific Partnership, an extra or supranational agreement, could affect the sovereign decision.
Well, I think what it partly is, any agreement like that, whether it's NAFTA or any of those kind of things, what they do is they bind nations together into supranational or transnational blocks. And so the biggest examples of that is like the EU, where all these different countries are unified into one political and economic body. Now, something like this isn't the same as that, but it's a step in that direction. And so anything like that binds each nation to laws that govern all of them, which means that reduces their ability to define their laws differently than that. So if Canada says, you know what, we're not going to cut down any more old growth forests and sell them to you because of our environmental policy, they might say, well, that's against, NAFTA. You have an economic responsibility to supply us with our hardwoods according to, that. I don't know if that particular case is or is not true, that, specifically, but there's lots of examples like that.
There's a couple of ones in NAFTA there was a U.S. company that wanted to, they produced a gasoline additive. The gasoline additive was found to be toxic. Canada said they didn't want it. We banned it. We were then sued by the company for cutting into their profits, and they won. They're allowed to add the poison to our thing. Yeah. And the same, Mexico tried to say that they wouldn't have a toxic waste processing plant in a certain part of it, and the American business already had plans to do it and it started like the works in motion, they were forced to accept the toxic waste management plan.
So these are bad things. Now, Shadow, do you know where the petitions can be signed to if people want to voice their opposition to these things?
Yes, we can link them in the comments, but change.org.
Change.org. Now, this has been a great podcast, in my opinion, my humble opinion. I think maybe we'll leave on that note. Go to change.org and sign the petition to oppose the TPP and the
TIPP.
TIPP.
I don't know what that one stands for.
It was Eli Lilly suing Canada for $500 million
Right.
for patent changes. Anyway.
Thank you very much. This has been The Prime Divide. I'm Blue Mantis.
Red Dwarf.
And Shadow.
It's about the love.
It's all love.
Good night.